A dude shot himself in the foot. Yeah, that just happened at a class I was at. So welcome back to the channel. I'm David, and I'm here to talk to you guys today about sort of the gap between I watch the things on YouTube and I do the things. Just like driving cars, a lot of people will be like, I have a car and that's a fast car, so now I know how to drive it on a race course. I didn't appreciate for a long time when people talked about what in my opinion were pretty basic stuff as being intermediate or even advanced techniques until I just experienced what I did this past weekend. So what actually happened on the range is that it was a competition pistol class. We had a guy who was newer to single action pistols. And when I say newer, I mean like living with them and doing the administrative moves and things like that. I don't know exactly how it happened, but from what we're putting together after the fact, he had a single action only gun. He was going to holster it. The safety was off and the holster body got in the trigger guard and launched around into his foot. The guy's fine. Everything went well. We had a really good safety brief in the class. We had really good personnel on staff to treat the wound, and he was on an ambulance within 15 minutes on the way to get proper medical care, and the bleed was controlled within probably 2 or 3 minutes. So that's going to be the first key learning of witnessing that in person is, number one is get stop the bleed training. If you are going to have poking holes in paper targets as a hobby, accidents can happen. It took me 10 years for that accident to finally show up, but we were very well prepared for it. There were multiple individual first aid kits in people's range bags. We had 2 very highly trained people who knew how to do stop the bleed training, and everything was fine. So beyond just listening to the podcasts and actually seeing it, like I'm actually going to formally take a stop the bleed class on the go forward. I've watched plenty of videos, I've listened to it, but I'm going to go and I'm going to get the training in person as a result of what just happened. Number 2 is you should have an individual first aid kit that has a tourniquet, a pressure dressing, chest seals, those kinds of things. It's basically an insurance policy. What's probably going to happen is you're going to buy it and it's going to sit in your car or range bag until the heat destroys it and you have to buy another one. It's an insurance policy. If you've got it on site, and even if you don't have the training, but if somebody else does, they can use your materials to treat you or somebody else. It's just a good thing to have around. And finally, number 3, get good, real training on how to actually manipulate firearms administratively, especially in 2023. There's a lot of people who are going to be picking up single action only guns that are not accustomed to it. But guys with striker guns, this is going to be a problem for you too. You just probably don't realize it. So some of the things that I do, this doesn't count as real training. This is some jerk sermonizing you on the internet, but just some skills that you need to develop when you are getting ready to go from a sterile square range environment where it's, 1 shot per second on the indoor range kind of thing, to moving to like a more free form sort of outdoor range using holsters and those kinds of things. Being proficient at an indoor range and being safe doesn't necessarily mean you have the skills to be safe at an outdoor range. So I'll talk about some of the skills that I developed and deployed that help me stay safe. First and foremost is equipment. If you're on a free-form range, having a good holster that you can put the gun in to free up both your hands to mess with targets and stuff like that is essential. Holsters are required when you get out on the range, because worst thing you can do is have a gun in your hand and need to adjust a target or something like that, and you've got your left hand, or if you switch the gun to your right hand. But regardless, if that is you, safety on, unload the gun and place it down. If you need to use both hands and don't have a holster, is a good way to get around that. But better is just have a holster and be able to holster safely. Another skill that is critical and seems somewhat commonplace, but if you are on target and your finger is on the trigger, when you come off target, finger goes straight outside the guard, real high over the ejection port to keep your finger off the trigger. That's complying with basic firearm safety stuff. If it is a single action only gun, you go one step further and pop the safety on. Every single time you present, you should pop the safety on if the gun is staying loaded. Single action only guns are very safe, but they just take a little bit more of awareness to pop the safety on. It becomes second nature. So if you're doing like a line drill with a bunch of other shooters and you're shooting pop, 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 okay, we're off, we're back, high compress ready or whatever we're doing. Immediately the safety goes on. Every single time you come off target and you're getting ready for the next string, put the safety on your gun, and then the follow-up skill to that is as you present, you sweep the safety off. Learning how to manipulate your manual safety is critically important. It's not the same beast as a striker fire gun that has a trigger safety. There is no trigger safety. These triggers can be very light and crisp. That's lovely, but at the same time, there's a little bit more that needs to go on in order to keep these guns safe. So the next one's going to be keeping the gun pointed in a safe direction. And this is honestly why I hate going to indoor ranges, because a lot of the general interest public have no concept of how they're pointing their gun. It's very natural to want to move the gun and keep it pointed with your shoulders, because after all, that's what feels natural when you present the gun to target. So why not move it with your shoulders? No. You have to learn how to keep the gun pointed in a safe direction, assuming that this is a safe direction, so that I can turn my head, turn my shoulders, everything else, and keep the gun pointed directly downrange. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to indoor ranges and watched people turn to the targeting computer to punch in a new distance and keep the muzzle of the gun, and they're pointing the muzzle of the gun through the barrier at the person in the stall next to them. That happens probably on a daily basis. It's so bad that I will only go to indoor ranges to shoot in the middle of the day when I know it's going to be empty, just because it's not worth managing other people's risk in that regard. And finally, let's talk about holstering firearms. If you've seen any of my USPSA new shooter stuff, this tip is in there as well. This is a safety checked gun, but talking about what's going on here. So this is your holster. It is on your hip. What you want to do to holster a gun safely is to look the gun into the holster and to dramatically kick your holster away from your body as you holster. So if I have this holster on the 3 o'clock position of my hip, I'm going to kick my hips out to the side so that as I holster, the muzzle doesn't come down over my feet. And a good way to holster is to drag the gun past the holster, then rock it down and into the holster. That's a great way to holster so you don't point the gun at your extremities when you are holstering the gun. And the final thing that is going to keep us safe on the range, guys, is just a little bit of humility. I recognize the irony of some guy whose channel is called The Humble Marksman, who is dangerously self-aware, if not potentially arrogant. There is no shame in realizing what we do on a sterile square range and what we do on a free-form outdoor range are two different skill sets. Having the humility and celebrating safety as kind of a culture is really important. I do not care how long you've been shooting guns at square ranges, because it is a different skill set when you get onto a free-form range and are starting to go into the holster and all that kind of stuff. Again, it is the race car phenomenon. If somebody hands you the keys to a race car because you drive a regular car every day, you think you have the skills required in order to make it happen. You might not, and you have to be aware of that. There is no shame in recognizing that you are a beginner in something that you have thought yourself advanced in. That's called self-awareness, and it's the journey to mastery ultimately. Sorry this video is not as fun and exciting as the videos normally are, but this was a life-altering event for, the people in the class and this gentleman who launched a round into his foot. So I wanted to bring some of my learnings to you. This does not count as training. Get real training. Get understood, get squared away, and blessed that you are ready to operate in that environment.